next. Let's look at an example. If I have EAM is 87, so that's my whole, and EAF is 62, I want to find FAM. I'm going to call that X. Well, part plus part, so 62 plus X has to equal my whole of 87, then X must equal 25 degrees. All right, then there's an algebraic one down here. I'd like you guys to do this on your own. This is a try me. We're going to go over it in class together. Notice, remember what it means to be a straight angle. Straight angles have 180 degrees. That's your hint on that one. So use that to help you get through that problem. And now we're going to look at midpoints. A midpoint is simply the point that is in the exact middle of a segment. So if C is the midpoint of AB, so let's draw that. I've got some segment AB, and C is the midpoint. It's the midpoint if and only if AC is congruent to BC. Well, I did not draw that very well, but now that I've marked it, we know that they're congruent. So C is the midpoint if those two segments are congruent. Informally, it's the exact center. It's just halfway along the line. It's the exact center of the line. So let's take a look at this on a number line. If point A has a coordinate of 2, right here A, and point B has a coordinate of 8, I want you to find the midpoint. Well, there are a lot of ways to do this, right? You could count your ticks and see which one's in the middle. I personally think, maybe I should actually have labeled that B, not 8, because I'm a little tired. There we go. I personally think it's always easiest to find the average, because if my numbers get funky, I'm not counting ticks. I'm relying on something that's easy for me to use. So I'm going to use the average of my two, and if you remember, to find an average, we simply add them and divide by the number of terms. So that would be 2 plus 8 over 2, which gets me 10 over 2, or 5. 5 would be my midpoint right here. So looking at that, 5 is 3 away from B and 3 away from A. It's the exact middle. 5 is my answer. So now, if I want to find the distance, I'm going to find the distance between -5 and 7. Remember, distance is the absolute value of the difference of the two. Absolute value of -12. My distance is 12. Okay. Well, my midpoint has to be halfway between them. So I'm going to change colors for this problem. We have -5 and 7. Well, we know that from here to here is 12, which means if I go 6 across, I should be at halfway, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I get 1. So this, in theory, is my midpoint right here. Well, let's double check that. Let's take the average and make sure that that's correct. So my midpoint, I'm going to add them together and divide by the number of terms, which is 2, which gets me 2 over 2, which is 1. That's right. We can extend this onto the coordinate plane actually pretty easily. If I have the point 5, 3 right here, and the point -3, -3, I can actually consider my x coordinates and my y coordinates independently. So if I'm looking at my x coordinates, I have 5 and -3. So 5 and -3, whose midpoint is going to have to be 1, because -3 plus 5 over 2 is 2 over 2, or 1. So my x-coordinate is a 1. And my y-coordinates are 3 and -3, which the midpoint is clearly 0 right there, because -3 plus 3 over 2 is in fact 0. So I expect there to be a point at 1, 0, and again, I couldn't really draw a straight line on this because the iPad's not letting me, but that's my midpoint. And we can make a formula out of this. If we say that we have coordinates x1, y1, and x2, y2, my formula is pretty simple. My midpoint is simply the average of the x's, so x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, and the average of the y's, y1 plus y2 over 2. And that's it. So we can do this pretty easily with any points. I'm going to do this one, and you guys are going to do the next one. So this is a try me for you guys. Okay. So if I have 2, -1, and -4, 5 as my points, I don't really need the coordinate plane, but it's there just as a visual. I simply plug in. This is x1, y1, and x2, y2, should be an x. And my midpoint formula, I have x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2. And we keep going. I plug in the points. My x1 is 2, my x2 is -4, that's over 2, comma. My y1 is -1, my y2 is 5, I put it over 2. So I end up with -2 over 2 is -1, comma, 4 over 2 is 2. So my midpoint is at -1, 2. And if I go over to -1, oh, look, it crosses at 2, and it looks like it's about halfway. Yay! All right, you guys do this problem right here, and we'll check it together in class. Next page. The last kind of problem you're going to see with the midpoint is a missing endpoint problem. And these are just as easy, you just have to set them up backwards. So if I have the midpoint, so they give me the midpoint, and I have an endpoint, but I'm missing the other one, I'm still going to plug into my formula. I'm now going to call my midpoint xm, comma, ym, right? And I've got this point here, x1, y1. I'm going to consider my x's and my y's separately. It's easier to do it that way. So I know that the x value of my midpoint has to equal x1 plus x2 over 2. Well, let's plug in what we know. I know that this is the x value of my midpoint. So -2 equals. I know that x1 happens to be 9. What I don't know is my second endpoint. And I filled in my equation. Now, I hate fractions, don't know about you guys, so I'm going to multiply by 2 straight off the bat, which gets me -4 equals 9 plus x2, or -13 is that other x value for my missing endpoint. Now we're going to do the same thing with the y's. Ym is going to equal y1 plus y2 over 2. Plug in what you do know. I'm going to change colors. Ym is 3, and my y1 here is 5. What I don't know is y2. We're all plugged in. I'm going to multiply by 2 both sides to make this horrible fraction go away. So I get 6 equals 5 plus y1. I subtract the 5, I get that 1 equals, sorry, that should be y2, guys, so sorry, y2. So my final answer for that missing endpoint is -13, comma 1. Boom. Yay. All right. That is the end of these notes. We're going to go over distance together as a group in class. So hang on. There is homework for you up online, and y'all have a marvelous day. Thank you.